investigated reported disturbance at Acer Plaza?
10-4 dispatcher, verify address.
It's Acer Plaza. Repeat, Acer Plaza.
They were all played. The final credits rolled on a trilogy of bullets, blood, and uncompromised bravado. I released my hand from the controller, and it was over. To make any kind of sense of it, I'd have to go back 24 years. Back to the day that Payne started. For anyone yet to experience this franchise, first of all, shame on you. Max Payne is a neo-noir thriller where you, surprise surprise, play as Max Payne, an NYPD detective turned DEA agent who comes home from work one day to find his white picket fence lifestyle is destroyed forever when his wife and baby daughter are brutally murdered by junkies high on the new designer drug called Valkyr. And understandably, he's pretty broken by this. Flash forward 3 years later and Max is hell-bent on vengeance, working undercover in the mob for answers until he gets framed for the murder of his partner and friend Alex.
No, it's locked. We gotta get out of here. If it's Lapino, it's... Alex? Alex!
Hunted by the mob and now wanted by the police, Max officially has nothing to lose and decides to wage a one-man war against the Puccinello family and the mysterious corporation behind Valkyr. It's a classic revenge story full of betrayals, Norse mythology references, and an introduction to the femme fatale assassin Mona Sachs. More on her later. Believe that.
Mona?
Max, we gotta stop meeting like this.
Through it all, Max narrates his determination and despair in metaphor-filled soliloquies delivered in the legendary gravelly voice of the late great legend that is James McCaffrey. And it's worth saying up front that this sorrow-filled character would not be the icon he has now become if it wasn't for the incredible performance delivered by McCaffrey. Even though it's pretty clear at times that for this game his work was on a rush deadline and he's probably not quite sure where the material's going, his voice elevates this game and Max to heights comparable with David Hayter as Solid Snake and Michael Ironside as Sam Fisher. He's just that good.
He was trying to buy more sand for his hourglass. I wasn't selling any.
What set the story of Max Payne apart at the time, and still sets it apart today, is how the story is told. Rather than usual cutscenes, the game uses graphic novel panels with voiceover. This was more of a necessity than a gimmick, as the game was made on a tight budget of $3 million for what was at the time a small Finnish studio of 20 to 30 developers. But it works by setting the game apart from other shooters and has also helped the game age a lot better. Go back and watch a cutscene from a 2001 action game and then come back and check these to see what I mean. Remedy also cut costs by creating their own in-house engine, the Max FX engine, to reduce the reliance on third-party engines. They also used staff and family members' likenesses for the characters, with the most famous being the main man himself being modelled on main writer Sam Lake, which, despite being more famous as a meme at this point, is my personal favourite version of Max Payne, and the one I really hope they choose to go with the upcoming remakes. The story has a dark and cynical tone, but it's also incredibly self-aware and laced with dark humour and nods to its inspirations.
The password. John who?
Come on. Okay, John Woo.
All right. Come right in.
The conspiracy runs deep as the game goes from mob dens to secret underground labs as Max rides that razor-thin line between justice and vengeance. By the time the credits roll, you've played a tragic but action-packed story that's a fusion of pulp detective comics and a John Woo action movie, and it nails them both. Max Payne set a benchmark for storytelling in a video game back in 2001, and it's still loved over 2 decades later. Even 24 years later, the visuals of Max Payne stand out thanks to their advanced particle effects for sparks and smoke that blew audiences away when it was first shown at E3. The Remedy developers flew to New York to photograph real city locations to use as a reference for the game's levels. Dilapidated apartment complexes, subway stations, and penthouse suites all feel grounded in a gritty reality. The snowfall is constantly in the background of many missions, becoming a character itself, making the atmosphere of every mission one of Max Payne's greatest strengths. However, The visual quality does vary greatly depending on platform. I grew up playing this on PlayStation 2 and always enjoyed how the game played and looked at the time, but with the benefit of having now played it on PC and Xbox since, it's safe to say that this is the weakest version of the game. The detail and resolution is massively reduced and it suffers from frequent rate drops. Textures are muddier, and due to the PS2's limited RAM, levels had to be cut into smaller segments, resulting in more loading screens that can really disrupt the flow of things. If, like me, this was the only version you played, you would still love the game, but putting it side by side with the PC and Xbox copies, the difference is night and day. The PC version is obviously the sharpest experience, but as someone who only grew up playing consoles and has just started PC gaming, I found the Xbox version to be the sweet spot for me. Where Max Payne really made its mark, however, is with its gameplay. At its core, it's a third-person shooter with tight, responsive mechanics, but what blew me and everyone else away was the revolutionary bullet time system, which lets you slow the world down to a crawl at the press of a button, turning firefights into these balletic slow-motion shootouts, giving you those precious extra moments to clear a room full of goons or line up a perfect headshot, resulting in incredibly cinematic and super satisfying combat moments. Especially when you are diving through the air, killing every enemy in the room before you hit the ground. It's so goddamn addictive. Games that followed, such as Fear and Red Dead Redemption, owe a debt to the path blazed by this game. Even without bullet time, the shooting fundamentals are rock solid with one of the best weapons arsenals of any games I've ever played. Dual Beretta pistols, pump action shotguns, Ingram machine guns, grenades, Molotov cocktails, and a sniper rifle to name a few, with each weapon feeling unique and sounding amazing. Take some hits and lose health during a shootout? Forget health packs, you wimp. We're popping painkillers over here to ease the pain.
Hey, that really sucked!
The game does try and mix up the action with some light puzzles and platforming. Some are decent, some are really terrible, and can really bring the flow of the game right down. The best example for this is walking across narrow wooden beams or vents to get to the next location and levels. Now, I might be a fat-handed, useless douchebag, but the controls are not made for moments like this. If you are off by a goddamn millimeter or move slightly too quick, you're joining your family in the afterlife. The only exception is the nightmare sequences. They still play like trash but have an excellent tone, and when I played them again for this video, I had forgotten about them. It was 2 AM, I had my headphones volume cranked to 11, the lights were off and my old lady was asleep upstairs. When I fell off the blood trail and heard this, I nearly shit myself. I thought some nutcase had broken into the house and caught me off guard playing some Xbox. Aside from these brief quirks, Max Payne's gameplay has aged really well and never feels boring. I struggle to think of any other shooter from that time that I would love to go back and play purely for how good the shooting feels, but this is absolutely one of them. When it was released in 2001, it earned widespread critical acclaim. GameSpot gave the PC version a 9.2 out of 10 and the Xbox version a 9+ score. The PS2 port earning an 8 out of 10, and PC Gamer US named it the Action Game of the Year. It also succeeded commercially, selling over 4 million copies across platforms and even earning a BAFTA for Best PC Game. So, what are my final thoughts? I fucking love this game. I loved it since I first played it as a kid, and in replaying it for this video, I love it just as much as I did back then. Max Payne is an easy recommendation for anybody who's yet to play it. It's a grim and gripping story told with a comic book twist, graphics that I still think look amazing today with realistic physics and particle effects, and gameplay so good it turned shooting drug addicts and mob cliches into an art form. There's very few games I know of that make a player feel completely in control of how a cinematic action sequence is going to play out, so it's no surprise it became an instant classic and keeps you invested from start to finish. This is an easy 9 out of 10 for me, and with the announced remakes underway, it'll be interesting to see if they can perfect this game even more for today's gaming standards, or will we appreciate the original all the more. Fortunately, after completing this version, we didn't have to wait much longer for the second chapter of Max Payne's story to unfold. I lied to myself when I said it was over. I was still alive. A sequel was released. it wasn't over.
You can't run from your past. Is love. Love hurts. When you're looking down the barrel of a gun, time slows down.
Oh, you can bet your sweet-ass Max Payne story wasn't over. Not even close. Max Payne 2 takes on a film noir love story and is set 2 years after the events of the first game. Our boy Max is back with the NYPD as a detective, but is still haunted by past events. When a routine call leads to Max investigating a series of murders carried out by professional hitmen posing as cleaners, Max unexpectedly crosses paths once again with Mona Sachs, the femme fatale assassin is soon to be dead at the end of the first game. She is now the prime suspect in the assassination of a US senator, dragging our depressed detective back into another conspiracy of death and betrayal. Why, Max? Why do you have to keep doing this to yourself? As they are reunited in less than ideal circumstances, Max and Mona form an uneasy alliance. He's a no-nonsense by-the-book cop, and she's an accused killer. This awkward relationship forms the beating heart of the story. The plot thickens as the game progresses, full of double crosses and tragic twists. Old acquaintances reappear, such as Vladimir Lem, an old ally with his own shady agenda. Loyalties will be tested at every turn. Just like the first game, Max Payne 2's story kicks off towards the end, with Max severely injured in a hospital, and then rewinds to play out the events that led to this point. As the journey unfolds, we are guided by Max's pain-soaked narration, which is once again delivered to perfection by James McCaffrey, filled with all the metaphors and cynicism that define the franchise. Graphic novel style cutscenes and voice narration return to emphasise the moody tone of the majority of the story, as well as a few in-game cutscenes, which are serviceable but nothing special. With these, we witness Max's internal struggles as he battles vengeance, forgiveness, duty, and desire. On the surface, Mona can be seen as just a love interest, but she also serves as a reflection of Max's darkness, pulling him into a spiral of violence with brief moments of happiness tinged with sorrow. Max Payne 2's story doesn't pull its punches, with its final act delivering intense showdowns and heartache in equal doses. As the credits roll, the haunting song Lake Goodbye, whose lyrics are based on a poem by head writer Sam Lake and performed by Poets of the Fall, drives home that melancholy vibe. By the end, you get a sense of the emotional journey Max has endured. It's a roller coaster, if you're willing to get on the ride. More on that later. Now, I'm about to talk about the graphics and gameplay, but I want to say this before I start off. When this game came out, I was purely a PS2 gamer, and I just assumed that Xbox, PC and PlayStation versions of games were the exact same game. Now bear in mind, I was like 10 when this came out. So I got this on PS2, excited to play it, and I fucking hated it. I thought the graphics were awful, everything looked super compressed, I hated the new model for Max Payne, and I didn't give two shits about Mona Sachs. It's safe to say I was disappointed, and in doing this video, I went back to the PS2 version willing to overlook the visuals, actually got into the story and liked the gameplay, but after playing it for about 2 hours I died and I thought to myself, oh damn, I'll have to replay this level from the start. No. The game started from the very beginning. This game wasn't auto-saving and I didn't see a save option in the pause menu. I was pissed. I went back to play it and realised every time you want to save the game, you have to go back to the main menu and manually save. It is super slow, and when the game gets to difficult points where you want to save more regularly, it completely ruins the flow of the game. This is all to say, playing this on Xbox or PC is a completely different experience. Quick save is in the pause menu and takes 2 seconds, and the graphics are greatly improved on the Xbox and at their best on the PC. I literally went from hating this game to loving it. So if you're playing this for the first time and it's possible to avoid the PS2 version, please do so. So from this point onwards, I'll be referring to the Xbox and PC versions. And for a 2003 game, Max Payne 2 has impressive visuals. Remedy took the engine from the first game and souped it up, giving a great looking version of a gritty New York with better detail, lighting and atmosphere. Character models also saw improvements, with Max getting a new character model in actor Timothy Gibbs, which shows a greater range of expressions that feel more natural. But if I'm being honest, as I said earlier, the Sam Lake model for Max is my personal favourite from the trilogy, and I would have preferred if this remained the only model for Max despite the graphical improvements. The new model for Max is very bland and without any charm by comparison. It just comes across like a cookie cutter generic action man. Thanks to the Havoc's physics engine, the environments are a lot more interactive. Barrels, debris and boxes are no longer just static props. They react to shots and impacts, giving some added chaos to gunfights. See an enemy on a ledge or outside of a window? Pop that sucker and watch their lithe, limbless body flip-flop over a railing, crashing into objects on its way down. Explosions also send bodies flying, which is super satisfying. Now I don't know if that says more about me or the developers, but it definitely adds to the feeling of playing out a John Woo film. From flashes of lightning illuminating grimy alleyways to blood-spattered walls after a hectic shootout, the visuals work in tandem with the story to really pull you in. Max Payne 2 also keeps the comic book panels, retaining that unique graphic novel aesthetic. I praised the game for having the overall production values being higher and a lot more polished than the first game, but as I mentioned with the Max Payne model, I do love the charm of the first game using actual staff, which gives it that scrappy underdog delivery that makes it unique. But to anyone that really doesn't care about this, Max Payne 2 is a better looking game and has aged really well. The style is backed up by substance, with gameplay that's tight and even more refined than the original with bullet time 2.0. With every enemy you take down boosting your slow-mo meter and making the time stretch further in your favour. This means there's an incentive to be actively aggressive rather than hiding and waiting, and with a slick new reload animation that gives you a second to plan out your next move. The gunplay feels fast and fluid, especially when combined once again with the awesome arsenal of weapons. Shotguns, assault rifles, dual pistols, grenades, they're all back, and each one with a distinct kick. Using a shotgun at close range and watching enemies get blown off their feet, or pulling out dual ingrams and spraying a room full of goons in slow motion never felt better. The AI of enemies isn't particularly clever, so when combining bullet time with a high powered weapon, you can really feel like John Wick and breeze through levels, and I'm all about it. In a handful of chapters you can also play as Mona Sachs, more often than not involving Sniper to provide cover from Max from afar. It's a nice narrative twist to see parts of the story play out from her perspective and add some nice variety. The best example is the construction site mission, where you have to pick off enemies to allow Max to move to various points, while you also have to run to various spots in the building to have adequate vantage points, making things tense as you provide support before Max gets gunned down. Nightmare sequences also return, but no longer are we running through blood mazes while a baby screams. These are brief but atmospheric scenarios that delve into Max's psyche. They are nowhere near as creepy or memorable as the originals in my opinion, but thankfully they're also not as long or irritating. All in all, gameplay in Max Payne 2 was a refinement of what came before. Stylish, responsive and unapologetically fun. It takes the formula of the first game, shoot, dodge, shoot, narrate, repeat, and polishes it to a sheen, proving that sometimes diving sideways in slow motion through a window never gets old. Upon launch, Max Payne 2 received mostly high praise from critics for the Xbox and PC version, sitting at a mid-80s score, with the PS2 port scoring lower in the 70s. I wonder why that could be. But by and large, it was lauded for its atmosphere and action and how it built upon its predecessor. The one criticism it received universally was its length, with many considering it much shorter than the original. This was an issue fans also raised, but generally they had much more love for the game than the critics. Sadly though, the game was not a financial success, falling below expectations, with Take-Two citing poor sales as a factor for their lowest financial forecast the following year. Regardless, it became a cult classic and won several Editor's Choice Awards and a nomination for James McCaffrey's performance, which was absolutely earned as he delivers another incredible performance. So, when it comes to my overall thoughts of the game, it has better action, improved graphics, a clearly bigger budget, and is an excellent follow-up. But I have to say I actually prefer the first Max Payne over this. Despite the fact the story here is objectively better written and more cohesive than the first one, I love the balls to the walls craziness of the original. going from a murdered wife and kid revenge story, to being undercover in the mob, to being framed for the murder of your best friend, to taking out junkies, mobsters, satanic cults, and uncovering a massive corporation conspiracy. It's entertaining as hell from start to finish. In Max Payne 2, personally, I don't care much for Mona. She's not that interesting to me, and the relationship between her and Max feels a little forced for the sake of the plot, which is absolutely fine, but it didn't hook me like the OG did. I also find the new character model for Max to be so bland compared to the iconic Sam Lake version, and I also feel like playing the PS2 version first as a kid left a sour taste in my mouth. As the worst version of the game, I just don't have nostalgic fondness for it like I do with the first one. A lot of people prefer this game, and I can't blame them. It's a great action game, the type we rarely see these days, and was a super satisfying conclusion to Max Payne's story. Or so we thought. But before we get to the most divisive game in the trilogy, we have to take a look at another game, released later in 2003. It feels oddly familiar, but just a bit more portable. Oh, and I'll give this one an 8 out of 10.
Make any kind of sense of it, I need to go back 3 years. Back to the night the pain started. I don't have a clue these days. I just shoot them as they come.
So the Max Payne GBA port was handled by Mobius Entertainment. No, not that one. That's it. The UK-based studio that later went on to become Rockstar Leeds, the development team behind the amazing GTA Liberty City and Vice City stories. It received a mature rating by ESRB, making it one of only a handful of games to achieve this, as the GBA was generally considered a more child-friendly platform. So as we've already gone over the console version, there's nothing new to cover here in terms of story, as it retells the original storyline, but impressively, it also manages to include the same graphic novel style cutscenes with voiceover narration, just with a few cuts in length. Some levels have been shortened or cut entirely to manage the handheld format. Visuals and audio have also been scaled back with much simpler music and heavily compressed voiceovers, but the fact they were able to keep the same experience on a handheld with these understandable sacrifices is pretty impressive. This version uses an isometric, sprite-based view, which is obviously a big change from the original, but still manages to capture that dark, gritty, snow-covered New York vibe. Levels such as the warehouse and subway stations are surprisingly detailed with destructible objects and even blood spatter when you gun enemies down. The character models do look pretty rough, especially when you're playing it for the first time in 2025, but overall the graphics are much better than I expected. Max Payne's signature gunplay and bullet time are still intact here, diving in slow motion with the R button to trigger shoot dodge, with each kill refilling the bullet meter a little bit, encouraging you to chain kills together. As someone who hasn't played a GBA game in a long time, the controls did take some getting used to, but eventually I got the hang of things and it felt smooth from there onwards. All the classic weapons from the console version are here too, dual pistols, shotguns, molotovs and more, and still feel and sound great. There is issues. Once again, the missions where you have to walk across narrow vents or hazards can be even more frustrating from the isometric view, and there were numerous times where objects blocked shots hitting goons. But worst of all is the crazy difficulty spikes, where the game would randomly go from perfectly playable to mind-numbingly difficult, at least for me. However, if you're able to get past these hang-ups, this remains an impressively faithful port to the classic Max Payne experience. Critics were pleasantly surprised by this handheld Payne. IGN, who still had a little bit of self-respect at the time, called it a surprisingly awesome conversion and awarded it an editor's choice 9 out of 10 rating, while EGM gave it an 8 out of 10 and said it looks much better on the GBA than you'd expect. Reviewers praised how the game retained the original's compelling story and invented bullet time gunplay on such limited hardware. Fans also viewed it as one of the GBA's most impressive ports, especially since it included the original's comic panel cutscenes and voice acting. But on the more negative side, some noted that the gunfights get very repetitive over time, the weaker music quality on the handheld, and the shorter length compared to the PC game, but overall the reception was positive. The GBA version holds a solid 78 out of 100 on Metacritic, proving that a well-made noir shooter could work on a handheld. Max Payne on the GBA is a commendable feat. condensing the meat of its big brother version onto a small handheld without losing its core identity. Despite its obvious technical limitations, it delivers a fun, gritty experience that's true to the spirit of the original. I'd give it a solid 7 out of 10 for die-hard Max Payne fans that are yet to play it. I'd say give it a go, but for newcomers it is going to be harder to recommend, considering that you can now play the main game on iOS devices and on handhelds such as the Steam Deck and ROG Ally. It might be a harder sell to convince them to try it out, but one thing's for sure. By the end of 2003, the franchise proved itself to be extremely accomplished. However, it would be nearly 10 years and a whole lot of drama before we got to experience Max's final and most polarizing chapter. Say what you want about Rockstar, but they understand capitalism. You buy yourself a Max Payne game and you get what you paid for. A decade has passed at this stage since we've last seen Max, and it shows. He's looking older, more grizzled, and still drowning himself in alcohol and sorrow. Max Payne 3 wastes no time showing us just how far our beloved anti-hero has fallen. The long hiatus hasn't resulted in Max living a good life. In fact, he's beaten down even further, working a thankless job protecting a wealthy family in Brazil. So let's dive in. As we know, Max Payne has always been haunted by his past, and in Max Payne 3, that past hasn't just caught up with him, it's run him over. Set 8 years after the events of Max Payne 2, Max is no longer working as an NYPD detective, but as a broken shell of a man, numbing his pain with booze and pills. Max is at rock bottom, mourning his wife and child and not caring if he lives to see tomorrow. When a security job offer comes up located in Brazil, Max has no choice but to accept when a situation forces him to leave his town. He becomes a bodyguard for the wealthy Bronco family. However, the inequalities of Sao Paulo are a powder keg on the verge of exploding, and it isn't long before Max's new job becomes another shit show when Fabiana Branco, the trophy wife of his boss, is kidnapped by favela gangsters on Max's shift. The story is another downward spiral with Max at the centre, looking to atone for another failure. As he fights to save Fabiana, he's pulled into a web of corruption that runs from the street gangs to elite police units. It's a story about regret, corruption, and more importantly, redemption, with Max asking, can he do something good again? Can he save someone and what's left of his soul in the process? Gone are the graphic novel panels of the first two games. Instead, Rockstar delivered the narrative through dynamic in-game cutscenes. Infused with stylized editing, with colour glitches and desaturation, they're very Man on Fire-esque, and I get that it's trying to play into Max's view of the world, fragmented and disorientated. And to me, this type of editing absolutely ruins the cutscenes. After the first couple of times, it gets incredibly jarring, and the story would have definitely been told better if it just used normal cutscenes. Max's trademark narration returns in full force, and it's gotta be said that despite being incredible in the first two games, James McCaffrey is on top of his game in this one, delivering one of the most iconic voiceover performances seen in a video game. This is part modern crime thriller, part character study, and while there's definitely a number of flaws that we'll discuss, it's hard to deny that this is an intense final chapter to Max's story. The game runs on the Rockstar Rage engine, the same core engine used in GTA 4 and 5 and Red Dead Redemption, which is enhanced by the Euphoria physics system, resulting in graphics that are still impressive today. Character models are detailed and expressive, environments are rich and detailed, with the team doing extensive research and even using advanced scanning technology for textures. Rockstar really sold a setting with realism. Lighting and shadows are another standout, going from gloomy offices and clubs to sun-drenched yachts, adding the appropriate mood to every moment. Animation is where Max Payne III really flexes his muscles, with animations that make combat feel chaotic and realistic. Now this is mostly awesome, but it can work against you. If, for example, you dive through the air and come into contact with a wall, Max will react to the impact, ending the dive early and disrupting the shootout. He will also wait until he has snapped the weapon into the correct position before firing while you're aiming. Extremely realistic? Yes. The best choice for a non-stop action game revolving around chaining multiple kills together? Not always. Max Payne 3 is still the high-octane shooter that's faithful to the franchise's core roots, but modernised for a new generation. Bullet time still works like you remember. Rockstar knew better than to mess with a signature mechanic, instead choosing to make it smoother and even more cinematic. Shoot dodge returns as expected, with Max now being able to stay on the ground after diving to allow you to fire from the floor and take out those last few goons before changing position. Rockstar did introduce some new mechanics that complement rather than overshadow the core gunplay. As was popular at the time, you can now snap the cover behind walls or furniture and shoot over the shoulder for added precision, allowing you to play through shootouts more tactically when needed. This definitely comes in handy when you are massively outnumbered, but the game still encourages you to keep moving forward and retains that non-stop action momentum. Eventually, enemies will begin to flank you, making trying to balance between the two styles extremely engaging. The gunplay is also superb. Each weapon from pistols to shotguns and assault rifles have their own kick and feel, with the sound design making each shot sound impactful. The Euphoria engine makes every shootout feel unscripted, as the enemies might fall off a balcony or grasp a wound as they go down, adding to that cinematic flair we first got a taste of in Max Payne 2. One big change here is the weapon system. Unlike the other Max Payne games where you could carry a small armory worth of guns, here you're limited to 3 firearms. One two-handed weapon like a rifle or shotgun, and 2 one-handed weapons such as pistols or SMGs. If you choose dual-wield pistols, you'll drop the two-handed weapon you're carrying. This is grounded in reality, sure, but I find this a bad move coming directly off the previous 2 games where you could carry a monster arsenal of every weapon under the sun that would make Frank Castle jealous. I get that this is to add a strategic element to each mission, but in a game that is essentially just kill everyone you see, it makes no sense to me why you wouldn't let the player choose every weapon they could grab when they want. Another mechanic is last man standing. If Max has a painkiller in stock and takes a fatal hit, time slows, giving you a brief chance to take out that enemy that brought you down. If you pull her off, Max will survive with a sliver of health, turning desperate moments into dramatic comebacks, and definitely comes in handy in the harder moments of the game. The enemy AI is a lot more aggressive than in previous games and can keep you on your toes. They don't just pop up eager to receive bullets like a sponge, they take cover, try to outflank you, and flush you out of your cave with grenades. They aren't geniuses by any means, but they can be relentless, especially on harder difficulties, and with Max being dropped in just a couple of shots, it can keep things tense. Rockstar's cinematic set-piece style approach to design means the game is mostly a linear experience. Each chapter is tightly directed, from rooftop rappel shootouts, a manic bus chase, or sweeping through a bombed out hotel. There is collectibles such as golden guns and clues which encourage wandering off the beaten track a little, but Max Payne 3 is definitely on rails. The positive to this is the pacing. The game doesn't let up, flowing from one intense gunfight to the next, with a few quieter flashback scenes interspersed to give you a bit of a breather. The campaign can run a solid 10 to 12 hours, and there was a multiplayer mode too. I'll be honest, as this was my first time playing this game, I gave it a miss, so I can't comment on how good it was at the time. Overall, the gameplay here is super slick thanks to the, at the time, modern conveniences such as the cover system, while keeping the core mechanics intact. Rockstar did a very respectable job balancing the old and the new, to me feeling like a classic Max Payne mixed with a bit of Uncharted and Gears of War. The weapon limitations and the attention to realism that sometimes irritates during firefights are frustrating, and I probably do prefer Max Payne 2's gameplay just for that pick up and play godlike feeling, but this is an excellent shooter, there's no doubt about it. When it launched in May of 2012, it received high critical acclaim and a fair bit of fan skepticism. Critics mostly praised the game's exhilarating action, great presentation, and once again the way James McCaffrey's performance brought Max to life with his trademark dark humour and gravitas. It currently sits at 86 out of 100 on Metacritic, marking it as a strong success among reviewers. The gunplay was singled out as being the best in class, with gamers who weren't series veterans getting hooked on the satisfying rhythm of the slow motion carnage. However, not everyone was sold on the change. Longtime fans, myself included, found that some of the wit and soul that defined Max in the 2 previous games had been sacrificed now that the franchise was solely in Rockstar's hands. The tone of this game shifted things from moody noir to more of a Trevor Resnick meets Man on Fire vibe, so it was destined to be polarising. The flow of the game also takes a bit of a beating due to the sheer amount of cutscenes in this game and how often they appear. This can be tolerated on a first play through, as the story is interesting, but it's upon replays that those unskippable cutscenes become a drag. The main issue I have is that I don't feel like I'm playing as the same Max from the first 2 games. In the first game, he should have been at his most miserable, but he was focused on getting his revenge and still cracked quips and intelligently pieced together the conspiracy puzzle. In the second game, he's still grieving but is back to work, developed a love interest in Mona, and once again using his wits to overcome obstacles. Here, it's been about 15 years since Max's wife and child were murdered, and he's somehow more depressed about it than in previous entries. I accept that he can never fully move on from their loss, but I really doubt that he's at his worst point emotionally a decade and a half later. I also can't imagine him taking up a private security job in Brazil, regardless of the circumstances he's facing at home, when he's always been portrayed as a die-hard New York cop that will try rid the city of scum until his final breath. There's no real personal stakes for Max on this job. He could say fuck this shit, hop on a plane somewhere else, and his life wouldn't be changed in any way. Having the game be set in Brazil also feels like a bit of a downgrade, seeing as New York is almost as iconic to the franchise as Max himself, and despite having some great levels, it doesn't have the same character to it, made all the more apparent in the game's flashbacks to New Jersey, where the chapters look and feel amazing by comparison. This was my first time playing this game, so considering how much time has passed since the second one, the distance helped me appreciate this game for what it is, but for hardcore fans I can totally understand how an overweight, bald, alcoholic Max in Brazil who seems dumber than usual would rub people the wrong way. It's a strange situation because this is an excellent game. I almost think if it had been released as its own IP, it would have favoured better, because 13 years after launch it's often hailed as a hidden gem and falls into the last of its kind category, as we rarely see such a high polished third person shooter like this anymore. Sadly, all this controversy did lead to Max Payne 3 underperforming commercially. It still shipped millions of copies, but didn't meet Rockstar's high expectations, contributing to a financial loss that quarter. This pretty much cemented the franchise as only becoming a trilogy, but who knows? Maybe with the remakes they'll sell a ton, and Remedy and Rockstar can always agree to partner up for a fourth game, and with Rockstar at the helm, it might come out in the next 30 years. Regardless of the issues mentioned, it's earned my respect with its incredible gunplay, graphics that still impress, a well written if out of place story, and hands down the best performance from James McCaffrey, who now lends his likeness to the character. That's right, 3 different games, 3 different Max Paynes. Not much point in my opinion of covering the platform version differences, as you can already guess where it's going. Max Payne 3 looks its absolute best with the PC version and performs at higher frame rates, but it still looks and plays excellently on the PS3 and Xbox. The 360 version has a bit of a performance edge, and the PS3 version has a slightly cleaner image, so it's a toss-up, but the core experience is kept intact in all variations. Whatever lens you're looking through, it's a damn pretty sight. So, what's my conclusion? Is it divisive? Absolutely. But it's also a triumphant finale for one of gaming's most tortured heroes. It drags Max into a new era and tests what he's made of, delivering some of the most intense gunplay of that generation, wrapped up in a slick production and a stylish presentation giving it a blockbuster film vibe. It's still a punch in the gut story of a man trying to find redemption in a rotten world. The themes of loss, guilt and corruption bring weight to what would have been a mindless shooter. And thanks to the incredible voice acting, gorgeous visuals and near perfect gunplay, the game sells you on its pain and payback narrative. I'll give Max Payne 3 an 8 out of 10. And there we have it. There's my brief little review of every Max Payne game there's been so far. Thanks for watching. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you haven't played any of these before, hopefully I've piqued your interest just a little bit. Leave a comment down below on what you'd like me to play next, and like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel, it's much appreciated. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Thanks!
Something in the night felt like a door had been opened, an echo of the past, an old monster snapping its eyes open in the depths of my brain. Closing your eyes forces you to look at the darkness inside.